Alright guys, welcome to day 2 of week 7 of chemistry. So day 1 we started our new unit on forensics, so make sure that you check that out. We talked about what forensics is and why we study forensics. So today we're going to be getting into more basic terminology when it comes to forensic science, more specifically crime scene investigation. So don't forget, also everything covered from day 1 through day 3 with forensics is going to be on your quiz, which is Thursday, May 7th. At 11 a.m. and it is a Zoom quiz, and you also have a test coming up next week, which is Thursday, May 14th at 11 a.m. So May 7th and May 14th at 11 a.m. are both important days, so make sure that you're staying on top of everything. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So let's go over some CSI terms. So when I say CSI, that's short for crime scene investigation. So the first thing I want to talk about is biological evidence. So we have to separate what kind of evidence we have. Now, biological evidence and physical evidence is not the only two types of evidence that we have when it comes to crimes. We also have something called circumstantial evidence and other types of evidence that comes into play. But in the realm of forensic science, we pay attention to biological and physical evidence. Now, if you were to become an attorney of some sort, like a defense attorney or a prosecutor, when it comes to crime, you would know all the different types of evidence. But for forensic scientists, we pretty much are only going to stick with biological and physical evidence. So let's talk about the difference between them. So biological evidence is going to be samples of biological material. More often than not, it's going to be DNA. So we find DNA in different ways. So we can find it in strands of hair, we can find it in blood, we can find it in saliva samples and other samples. And it doesn't just have to be human, it could also be, animal or anything that has DNA. We can obviously test its DNA. So that's going to be biological evidence. So we would love, as forensic scientists, we would love to come onto a crime scene and be able to find biological evidence, because that's going to really help us narrow down what it is and who it is we might be looking for. So the reason why DNA is such a powerful tool is that more often than not, somebody that commits a violent crime has committed a crime before, and hopefully that person is already in the system and we have the ability to match their DNA. So I know that sometimes it seems like we just have the entire world's DNA that we can just kind of magically test. We don't really have that technology available everywhere. I'm sure that there's a super system that will be put in place at some point in the future where we have access to everybody's DNA, so that way we can do DNA matches. But more often than not, we don't have a DNA match for somebody unless they've already committed a previous crime. So that makes it a little bit tricky, but if there is a suspect in a crime, we can always bring them in and we can ask them to take a DNA sample. So usually they take like hair samples, and if they agree to that, then we can see if their DNA was matched with the crime scene. So one of the tactics that police officers will often use if they bring in somebody, a suspect or an individual, in for questioning and ask them to do a DNA sample, if they are resistant towards it, that not always, but sometimes is a good indicator to investigators that something's not right there, because an innocent person would more than likely have no issue allowing their DNA to be tested in order to clear them. So that's biological evidence. Physical evidence is going to be any material object introduced as evidence. So a couple of examples would be fingerprints, tire marks, footprints, fibers, paint, and building materials. So this is where the nitty-gritty of forensic science really comes into play. So being able to find hair samples or blood or saliva or anything like that, absolutely, that's a huge deal, and we have to take that evidence and we have to treat it very carefully because it's going to help us in the long run. But physical evidence is one of those things where you really have to have an eye to find this stuff. So how are you able to walk into a crime scene and be able to tell what is physical evidence and what is just there just because it's always been there? For example, if you guys came into my house, there's a bunch of laundry on the table. Well, let's say that crime scene investigators came into my house. You would have to determine, is this person just a messy person who has a bunch of laundry all over their house? Or did something happen that led to the physical evidence of a bunch of laundry around their house? It's really tough when you think about it, because you have to determine somebody's lifestyle compared to the crime scene and figure out which is which. So that's why having testimonies come into play about how a person normally behaves, what you normally would see in their environment day to day from friends and family, that's really important to gather all of that important information. The other term I want you guys to know is crime scene investigators. So crime scene investigators is anybody responsible for identifying, gathering, and analyzing evidence from a crime scene. So this could be a wide variety of people. This could be a team of people. You have some people who take pictures, while you have other people who collect evidence, while you have the homicide detective who actually is the police officer in charge of the investigation. So we would consider all of these people crime scene investigators because that's literally what they're doing. They're at the crime and they're investigating the crime. So again, it's going to be a team of people that are working together. So some might have various jobs, but they have to secure the area, they have to examine and document the scene, and they have to preserve and package everything in order to send it off to the lab. Not all crime scene investigators are necessarily forensic scientists. Again, we have police officers on the scene, and some people are what's only called field agents, which means all they do is collect the evidence, but then they don't actually do anything with the evidence. So forensic scientists are going to take the evidence and actually test the evidence. That's what they're responsible for. But crime scene investigators, they might be forensic scientists, but not all of them are. Some of them are just in charge of taking pictures or just collecting samples and then delivering it to the forensics lab. Alright guys, that is it for day 2. Don't forget about your quiz on May 7th and your test on May 14th, and I will see y'all later.